I want to just take a moment to share an interaction I had just recently where someone commented on one of my videos, and essentially they were being very critical of me, saying a lot of things about me that were very presumptuous, projecting a lot of their presumptions onto me. And I do get comments like that from time to time, but I usually just ignore it. I figure this person is probably unhappy or something of that sort, and that's why they feel this compulsion to judge or criticize. We've all been there, so I don't take it personally. I just ignore it and go on with my life. But for some reason, which I can't quite explain even now, I felt compelled to reply. And I began by telling them that they had a lot of presumptions about me, a lot of projections in regard to who they think I am, or perhaps in regard to who they think I am. But I also told them that I valued their input nonetheless, and that I was open to self-reflection, which I am. If someone criticizes me, I will take a moment to reflect on it, to see if there may be some truth in it. And sometimes there is some truth within these criticisms. It may not always be that the whole thing is true, but there may be some small nugget of truth in there somewhere. And I'm willing to consider that. I'd like to be aware of that. I'm always in this process of self-discovery, learning and growing and evolving. And if there's one thing in life that I'm committed to, it's this. And that's a part of it. Sometimes there are things about ourselves that we don't see, but others do. And sometimes the only way we become aware of it is for someone else to point it out to us. And even if it comes across as judgmental or condemning or condescending or even hostile, even if the intent is to degrade or insult, for that person to exert their own sense of intellectual or spiritual superiority, there may still be something of value in there someplace. And so I take that into consideration. So I told this person that I'm open to reflecting on what they said, and I followed it up by letting them know also that there were some things which they had said, not in regard to me, but in regard to the topic of the video, that I agreed with. Even if someone is being critical of me, they may still have some valuable perspective to contribute to the conversation. And I can appreciate that. Now, after I had said all this, posted my reply, and walked away, it occurred to me that maybe I shouldn't have replied at all. Maybe I should have done what I usually do and just left it alone. Because in my experience, people who have a lot of presumptions tend to stick with their presumptions. And I figured what is most likely is that either they will respond with more criticisms in order to defend their initial stance and to defend their ego perhaps, at which point I will just ignore it, or they might not respond at all. And quite to my surprise, they did respond, and what they said was, you know what? You're right, I was being presumptuous. I don't know anything about you. And after some time of my own self-reflection, I realized that I do have the tendency to do that sometimes. And they apologized, and it was a very sincere apology. I can't recall their exact words at this moment. It was probably worded better than that. But when I read it, it warmed my heart. It was such a sincere and heartfelt response. And just a moment ago, this person had come to me with this sort of ugliness. And now they had discarded that, and their real beauty was shining through, and it was quite beautiful. And I just felt, and still feel, so much love and respect and gratitude for them for really owning that, and for having that kind of integrity and humility, because it's a very rare and precious thing in our society. You don't see that often enough. And it's very difficult to admit when we're wrong or when we've made a mistake. Even I can say that for me, it's difficult sometimes. And even when you know that you're wrong, it can be very difficult to admit it. You've got your pride, you've got your reputation or your self-image or what have you. And there may be some concern, some fear in all of this, that if you admit to being wrong, that the other person rather than being understanding and forgiving, might chastise you for it. And if you admit to being wrong, it's almost like you may be giving them a justification to chastise you. And so it takes a certain amount of courage. And that's also what I saw in this person. I saw a lot of courage, and that's something to be admired. And just to imagine what the world might be like if everyone could have this kind of courage and humility. Imagine how many conflicts could be avoided or resolved just by someone admitting that they were wrong. How many divisions could be healed, or how many relationships. I mean, there are people who have been separated from one another for years and still no one's had the courage to admit that they were wrong. If we can just take a moment to reflect and to recognize our mistakes in whatever regard, and then to take the responsibility to apologize and to make the effort to correct oneself, to resolve to change that behavior or whatever it happens to be, imagine what that can bring to the world. Because here was someone who came to me with a kind of divisive energy, and it could easily have turned into a conflict. But with self-reflection and self-awareness, we were able to resolve it. And what we left with, at least I can speak for myself, I can't speak for them, but I assume for them it's very much the same, is that there was a coming together, a sense of connectedness, of honoring one another. And it was as if we were also keeping one another in check, because it's easy to lose sight of oneself and to become arrogant or prideful or what have you. And sometimes it takes someone else to help you realize that you still have areas to work on. And I'm not just speaking in regard to this other person, but in regard to myself as well. I still have areas to work on. And when I receive criticisms, even if they happen to be entirely false, it's a challenge for me to recognize any sort of reactivity or agitation that I might feel in response, and to really reflect on that and see where it's arising from. And if I can respond to that in a way that doesn't reflect the same kind of animosity, if I can instead be respectful and considerate and compassionate. And in this particular situation, it was an opportunity for both of us to practice self-reflection. It's like Ram Dass once said, "I can do nothing for you but work on myself, and you can do nothing for me but work on yourself," and that we're all just walking each other home. And I realize in saying all of this that there's a fairly good chance that this person might be watching this right now. And if you are, you know who you are. And I have a lot of love for you. And I found your response to be quite inspiring. And I hope that by my speaking of this and sharing this, that you might also be an inspiration to others as well. I think it's a very important thing that a lot of us need to work on. So I want to thank you once again for being such a beautiful example of humility and courage, and for providing us with this lesson that we can all learn something from. If you find value in this content, be sure to like, share, and subscribe.